Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode 10 of Moving the Goalpost. This is part 2 of 2, a 10-man PPR mock draft. I am your host, Danny Mills. With me is Mr. Dennis Brinn coming back tonight. Donnie, how are we feeling?
You're feeling great. Thanks for having me again. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Love to hear it, man. So we're gonna hop right into it. I've been thinking about this overnight. I've been looking at the board. Cam Akers, his ADP currently is 60. I'm on the board at 77. I definitely need a second running back. Donnie and I don't have to go too far in depth. We talked about this on episode 1, I believe, about Cam Akers and, 2 years removed from the injury. Prior to the injury, he was a very high draft pick. We had I believe, a very high projection for Cam Akers before the Achilles. So he's going to make it simple for me. I'm going to take him here. After Cam, we have DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, Dalvin Cook, the free agent who did go visit the Jets. Looking forward to seeing that on Hard Knocks as well. I know they followed that situation, see what happened with that, why a contract wasn't signed. Last I heard, he wanted 30 million, 15 of it guaranteed. I do not foresee that happening for
No,
Dalvin Cook. You agree with that?
definitely not gonna happen for Dalvin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Should, but not.
All right. And then Jahan Dotson, who I love this year, even as a Commanders fan. Javante Williams, Jackson, Smith, Najigba, JSN. And then it comes back to me at the 904.
Did you see what Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave said about JSN?
I did not.
They said both of them said that JSN was the best receiver in that room.
When they were in Ohio State, that's awesome.
Yep. So I think JSN has a path to be a top option. I don't think it's going to happen this year. It's going to be one of those too many mouths to feed situations. I think. I don't think. I don't think Pete Carroll will allow Geno to throw the ball 50 times a game to make all three of them viable receivers. So one of them is going to be the odd man out, and I just think that DK is, you know, it might not be this year, it might not be next year, but JSN does have a path to be a star receiver in the league. He looks like a supreme talent, but I think Lockett is a great receiver, and I think DK Metcalf is a great receiver as well. So I do have high hopes for JSN, and he's another guy injury away from being an every week starter.
I agree with that. I believe, too, he is going to have a role right from the beginning in the slot for them. So I think he'll be out there in three wide sets. I don't think I agree with you. I mean, Pete Carroll always loved running the ball. If Kenneth Walker comes back healthy, Charbonnet comes back healthy before week 1, I could see what you're saying, that they're going to hold Geno from taking his shots 50 times a game. But JSN is elite talent, man, and I think you and I agree, and I think we talked about that too. I'm in on Ohio State receivers. I think
Absolutely.
almost every single one of them that comes out, they're absolute studs in the league. So I think JSN will have a role. I agree with you. One injury away from a path. Tyler Lockett, he's 31, be 32 next year. He's definitely topping the cliff and on his way out when it comes to receivers. Typically around this age is when we start to see the drop off for them. So,
Yep.
okay. So with that, it brings me back up at the 904. It's very interesting to see Kyle Pitts there. I'm not going to take him. I never really transparently take two elite tight ends in season long. I don't really like the decision making process in that much. I'd rather just trust my guy who I took in Goddard. So I'm going to go ahead and stack depth. I'm going to take Isaiah Pacheco here. Um, from what I understand, CEH is possibly even on the cusp of being cut. So if that happens, that
Generic Prince, baby.
yes sir, Mister 61205, Deneric Prince, who him and Pacheco would share time, but I mean, in the best offense in the league, and it wasn't too long ago that Andy Reid produced top 5 running backs. I think people forget that, man. That before like
Yep.
the last 2 years, for whatever reason, I don't think they've just struck the talent they really wanted to. Pacheco came on late last year, but I think people forget like Andy Reid produced top 5 fantasy running backs consistently for like 10 years.
That man ran screen passes before screen passes even existed.
Right.
All right, let's see what's going on here.
So we have B Rob coming after Pacheco. We have our first defense coming off of the board at 906. Alvin Kamara, who currently is facing a suspension. James Cook, who a coach came out and said they could see him as a 3 down back. A lot of us are not projecting that. A lot of us see a more shared backfield.
Yep.
Traylon Burks coming off at the 909. He's somebody who I typically like a lot more than some people. I just think his physical talent will be superior this year, and he'll really start to earn that edge and show that he can be a number one receiver when D Hop takes his leave of absence.
I like Traylon Burks as well. I think that he is one of the more physically gifted receivers that have come out of the draft in quite a few years. The dude is a freak athlete. He's huge. He reminds me of AJ Brown. Happens to be on the Titans as well. One of those situations that if D Hop is not good any longer, which it's certainly possible, but it didn't look that way last year. But I think that they won't have enough passing volume to support 2 startable wide receivers. But I love him as my fifth and sixth and injury away type guy again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, last year he even had a couple good spike games, and he showed that, he has the talent. I mean, he said he feels better this year. Videos in camp and reports line up with everything that's coming out in that regard. So we'll see. I mean, it's really going to depend on Tannehill and obviously, Derrick Henry, how many touches he's going to get. I mean, he's at 30 now, so he's got to be starting to wear down. I mean, I can't imagine they're trying to
Yep.
give him the ball 230 times again this year.
Yeah, he's not getting 44 carries a game anymore.
Right. All right. So just a quick recap on Donnie's team as he's up at the 9-10. So Donnie starts with the double hero RB, Saquon Barkley and Nick Chubb. He comes back. He has some great options. He goes with Chris Olave and T. Higgins. Stacks his wide receivers again at the 5-10 and 601 with Jerry Judy and Scary Terry. And then at the 7-10, he gets his elite tight end with Darren Waller and comes back with Mr. Consistency, Mike Evans himself. So, Donnie, as you come up at the 9-10, what are you thinking here?
In this type of situation, the double running back start, typically I don't plan on, and knowing that I plan on starting 4 receivers pretty consistently throughout the year with my double running back stack. I'm pretty much going to want to load up on as much wide receiver talent as I can, because and a little bit higher upside guys like in these later rounds. And then my running backs, I'll probably end this draft with like five, seven, 5 running backs, 7 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 quarterback, and 1 defense. I believe, yeah, that's 15. My quarterback situation right now, the quarterbacks that are left on the board. Even though I do need one, I'm not taking one right now because I have Deshaun, Tua, Kirk, Daniel Jones. I have them all in the same tier. So I'm, not really mad if someone happens to take a backup quarterback. No one really is going to take one at this point. I think I can pretty safely assume that I can take my quarterback in the 14th round, my defense in the 15th round. So I'm going to try and take my best positional players I can right now. And the let's see what's here. It looks like I have some tier 5 running backs left. Is there anybody that I like in the running back spot right now? Not particularly that's jumping out in my eyes. That's jumping out of my eyes. My wide receivers, The wide receiver options I like at this point, I got Gabe Davis, I got Cortland Sutton. I think Cortland Sutton was a huge disappointment. I had a huge share of him last year, and I don't think that he is going to be I think that he will do better than he did last year, but I don't think that he's going to be the primary option in that offense. He just looks sluggish like the whole year. Like he just didn't look like fast. I don't really know how to explain it other than like, he just didn't look like an elite talent. Jerry Judy looks like an elite talent with the ball in his hands. Cortland Sutton does not to me. Um, I think my first choice here is going to be Gabe Davis, and that's going to put me at 6 receivers, I believe. I think Gabe Davis has a path to being a startable receiver, high powered offense, most likely the number 2 option in that offense. Um, and I think getting Gabe at the ninth round is a huge value. Um, and let's see, higher upside guys. Should I go like I don't think like Antonio Gibson, if a injury happens to Brian Robinson, I don't think he has a path to, greatness. AJ Dillon potentially with Aaron Jones going down has a path to greatness and also has some, standalone value, but he's never going to be starting in my lineup over Nick Chubb and Saquon. I like Khalil Herbert. He's a starting running back at this point, and I do like his potential to be I like his potential in a run heavy offense. So the running backs that are on the board at this moment, I think Khalil Herbert is probably my favorite. Um, I don't really like any of these receivers more than Khalil Herbert at this point. The only one that I could make a case for, I think, would be Quinton. But again, that's one of those situations where too many mouths to feed, and I think the drop off after all the receivers. Um, actually, yeah, I think so. I think Khalil Herbert is going to be my favorite option at this point because I think he's a starting running. I'm fairly certain he's going to be a starting running back in Chicago. I don't think Deontay Foreman is going to steal many of his reps. I think Roshan will have a role, but I think it's going to be one of those mid-season takeovers if it happens.
Well,
So I'm going to go Khalil Herbert.
in the moment, I mean, I agree with you. I love Khalil Herbert. I think when he was on the field last year, I mean, he showed and showcased elite talent. Uh, he he did very well when he was able to get that role. Currently, right now, I think him and Foreman are splitting first team reps, and Roshan, he did have an injury. I didn't see an update whether he was back practicing or not. But even with that, I think it'll be the hotter hand. And Khalil Herbert, even last year with David Montgomery, when they did the hotter hand, he was the guy with the hotter hand. So
Yep.
I think he'll earn that role. I think that's a good pick there to add to your running back stack and add that depth at that time. And then with Gabe Davis, me and Nick just touched on him, which we actually, I mixed it up. It was my fault. It was PPR. He finished 36, and half PPR he finished 23rd. So I don't think he can do worse than 36. And getting him in the ninth round is an absolute steal of value. And if he
Yep.
connects on three, four, five, six, even of those deep balls that he missed last year, we're 5, 6 touchdowns and uh, an extra 200 to 300 yards. I mean, it was. I think when we did the average, it was over 20 yards a catch last year. That's crazy.
Yeah, he's an efficient player in a high-powered offense. You can't go wrong with Gabe Davis, especially this late.
All right, so we're coming back around. We have Quentin Johnson who comes off Eagles defense, Michael Thomas, Cortland Sutton, who Donnie touched on. I think you hit the nail on the head with him. I mean, prior to the injury, he definitely looked decent. He showed, that he had talent. I can't. Is this his second or third year removed from that?
Let me see.
I want to say
I'm not sure.
we're because he did not look comfortable. He didn't look like he,
It'll be his third year back.
right. So last year, that's what's so odd about that is typically, your first year back, you expect to see a little difference, like with JK last year. He was a little off with his knee, but 2 years removed, they're usually almost back to normal. So, and he did not look like he did prior to the injury at all.
No. Nope.
So he's tough to trust, man. I got burned in everything that I touched with him last year. So for me, I definitely prefer Judy or even Marvin Mims now that Tim Patrick is out with an Achilles again.
Poor Tim Patrick.
I know, dude. Signs that big contract, back to back season ending injuries. He'll be 31.
Yep.
All right. We'll pour one out for him. All right. So that brings me up. I'm at the 10:07. I am going to take my highest guy here, who would be Zay Flowers, the rookie out of Baltimore. I know the big debate between him and Bateman. Bateman had good target share last year when he was in there. Bateman played pretty well when he was healthy last year. Also, Monken's going to spread it out. Lamar's going to throw the ball a little bit more. I think Zay Flowers will be the primary beneficiary of that. So I'm going to take him, especially in PPR. I'm going to add to my depth of wideouts. Right after him goes both of his teammates. We have Rashad Bateman, Antonio Gibson, Odell Beckham, A.J. Dillon. We got a sniper in the mountains as my guy Jacoby Myers comes off the board. All right, so that brings me back at the 11:04. Coming off as Zay Flowers. I think I'm going to look to add to my running back depth here. And I'm going to add to the triple stack. And what I mean by that is, so I have I have four Eagles on my team. I have the captain himself, Jalen Hurts, Mr. AJ Brown, and then I have Dallas Goddard. And with the triple stack, I'm gonna add Rashad Penny. For me, I'm very comfortable uh, starting them, especially on like a Cam Akers bye week. I have no problem putting Penny in there with the Eagles offense. Um, they score enough that multiple players on their offense are going to do well pretty consistently on a consistent basis. It's just a matter of being there when the time is right, especially for Rashad Penny. Uh, how do you feel about that, Donnie?
I think we talked about this. I think Rashad Penny is a great north and south runner. I think DeAndre Swift is a great east and west runner. He showcased that ability all last year when he just wouldn't run north and south for Dan Campbell. Um, he just wouldn't hit the holes. He just kept trying to run around people. So I think they both complement each other in those ways. I think that if they are used properly, it can be a really, really good 1-2 combination. I like Rashad Penny a lot. I like that. I like him as a bye week back. I think you're going to be in this situation. CMC, the obvious one, and then you're going to be playing Cam Akers and Pacheco based on matchup, and then Rashad Penny would be in there for bye weeks. I love that.
All right, and that would bring you back up at the 11:10. And Donnie's coming off of Gabe Davis and Khalil Herbert on his last two picks. Currently has three running backs and six wide receivers. I know that
All right.
you're possible. Oh no, so we got a couple picks where you're on the hook for a defense.
Yep. Yeah, I got one, two, three, four, and again, for the sake of this draft and my oh, uh, for the sake of this draft, I will take a defense in the last round. But in my home leagues, I will not be drafting a defense because I would rather take a player, especially in 10 man, because you're only getting 150 down the ADP, and you still have some potential players, and you never know what can happen from most of the drafts. Like are going to be after the last preseason game on August 27th. First preseason or the first season regular season game isn't until 9/7, and that's a Thursday game. So 9/9 9/10 is the first Sunday of football. So there's a lot of time that something could possibly happen in practice. So I would much rather give myself one more option, than drafting a defense. And if it doesn't happen, then I just drop the least player and pick up a defense for week one.
And
Um,
and listen,
Good.
that is tips 101 with Dennis Brinn right there. That in your home leagues, you take nothing but position players and then you drop one for a defense. And you too can be successful in this.
And I mean, if you're not comfortable doing that, or you think San Francisco's defense is going to put up 15 points a game, by all means do that. Or whoever's defense is going to put up a lot of points, that's fine. And I've done it before, and I've taken the Eagles defense because I'm an Eagles fan, and I like rolling out the Eagles defense every week. That's fine too. It's just I like giving myself a little bit more, a little just an added edge. That's all.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very rare that my game comes down to I lost because my defense scored 8 points and their defense scored 12 points.
Yep.
And it's in almost all my home leagues and every year that I've done it. And I know again, I got to the dance late a little bit, but it's always like your fourth, fifth, or sixth week that somebody picks up that defense on a Thursday and that defense goes off and they keep them and they go off again and then they just have them because they end up being one of the top three defenses.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna pull it up and see what was the stats from last year. Um, Actually, it's not letting me pull it up. Do you have the stats up for last year?
For defense,
Yeah. Like, what's the top defense compared to like the 15th ranked defense? All right, so I got, last year the number one defense in New England at 180 points. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Indianapolis at the 12th ranked defense is at 120. So 60 points kind of is a lot. So, I can definitely argue, you could definitely argue that it is worth it taking a defense, but that's just not my style, I guess. And the amount of times that a defense is going to have 180 points is just it's not very frequent. The closest second was Dallas, and then San Francisco at 160, and then Philly at 150, and then the rest of them are pretty much in a group from like 135 to 120. So I mean, if you do want to draft that elite defense, by all means, I just like giving myself that other option.
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm not taking a defense at 10:03 or 9:06. I promise that. It's for me, it's with the defenses, as you said, I mean, if it's your preference, if you feel like your team is stacked and you want to go ahead and add that defense, but I'd be interested to see like where the Patriots drafted, and if they were drafted, where they ever dropped, where they picked back up, because again, I feel like that's that year like they didn't start off that great, and then they hit that middle of the season run and they finished pretty strong. They had, I think it was like a crazy amount of turnovers and defensive touchdowns, and they were just putting. I think that was Mac Jones' rookie year that they literally put that kid on his back and
Yep.
carried him like the Ninja Turtles did Master Splinter. It was a miraculous fantasy year for them. But again, I feel like that's a team that got picked up the fourth or fifth week. They went off, and again, the kid or whoever got him off waivers kept him, and it just continued to happen. So why not? And then you end up with the number one defense off waivers.
Yep. And I can guarantee you that last year nobody drafted Jacksonville's defense, who finished fifth.
Right.
But anyway, let's get the show back on the road. I Still, I'm not going to draft a quarterback. Like I said, I'm going to stick to the 14th round as my quarterback. If somebody takes a backup, oh well. I'm okay with Deshaun, Tua, Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, even Geno. Honestly, it really wouldn't matter to me all that much at this point because I didn't get a top 8 quarterback really. So I'm just going to continue to add to my depth. I'm targeting a 5-7 finish, so I could draft 2 more running backs, 1 more receiver, and I was going to take Elijah Moore if he fell to me because another player that I think has a path to being startable is a potential Deshaun Watson, return to glory, um, and Elijah Moore could be a beneficiary of that. I think that Elijah Moore could be the second option in that offense. I think if he's not the second option or the second most targeted player, he will be the third. David Njoku is a great player. I just feel that Elijah Moore is a better player pound for pound, and I think he will see more looks than David Njoku. Elijah Moore showcased elite talent in his limited time um, in New York. So yeah, I would have taken Elijah Moore there. Unfortunately, he's not there. So I'm looking elsewhere at this point. The only receiver that I think we spoke about Nico Collins, another guy that has all the skills, um, with being the probable number one option in an offense that is nobody really knows what's going to happen yet. I think is worth taking on a guy that has the physical skill set. So I'm going to take Nico, and that will cap off my receivers for the draft, and I'm okay with that.
So even as a split from the 410, I think that's twice you got somebody who I didn't think Gabe would come back to me. I was like, all right, that's a pretty drastic drop, hoping that Gabe comes back around the turn. But I was hoping that Nico would come back because he's a freak of an athlete. The kid is, I mean, he's 6'4", 215, runs 4.4. They say that Stroud has been targeting him throughout camp. So I think if they do play behind, uh, there could be a lot of volume for Nico. I think the other thing with Houston too is, again, the AFC South outside of Jacksonville, as you said, they do have a pretty strong defense. They came on last year, and Lawrence, I think he leaps again. He'll be an absolute monster. But I think if Houston is well coached, they're going to be a scrappier team. If Fields is the one that breaks that curse for Ohio State quarterbacks and Stroud comes behind him with the weapons that he could perform well. And Nico has the capability to have a big year. I think that's definitely a great pick as you come back at the 11:10 and the 12:01.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Now moving to my running back situation, I got to draft 2 more, and then and a quarterback and a flyer. So if I don't draft a defense in the 15th round, there's going to be guys like some injury away running backs I like, um, and I'll get to that point when it comes. But there's still 2 running backs on the board that I think have standalone value that you could actually. There's more than 2. I think Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert will be the primary running back. Like they'll split series on Miami. I don't think they're going to run the ball very much. I think Devon Achane will probably be primary pass catching back and probably move into a third down role once he proves himself. So I think Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert have potential as standalone value. I like, but out of the 2 that I was talking about initially, Damian Harris and Elijah Mitchell, you mentioned that James Cook has the potential to be a 3 down back. I think he does have the potential to be a three down back, but as we saw last year, um, Devin Singletary still did have a role. He was pretty much like the primary runner, and he was a smaller guy. And we know from, years past that Damian Harris can run the ball. The dude is a powerful guy. I think he will have some rushing touchdowns. I think he'll be primary goal line back. I think that's why they are bringing him in. Naheem Hines going down for the year, as we know. So I think it's going to be it could be a 50-50 timeshare between James Cook and Damian Harris, or 60-40 with some touchdown upside on Damian Harris. I like him a little bit more than Elijah Mitchell, so I'm gonna take Damian Harris there.
I agree with you. I like that one a lot too, especially with Damian Harris. If he does get that goal line work, those touchdowns will be very valuable for him. I mean, and it's not guaranteed that Cook gets this bell cow role either. I know with Hines going out, Latavius Murray is there also, but
Oh
Harris,
my God,
I know, Mister
Mister Come in, give you 20 points one game and disappear.
Old Latavius. But Damian, he's proven in New England. He's a capable back. He belongs in the league, so he's on one of the best offenses in the league. Can't go wrong with him at the 12:01. Somebody that I was looking at actually came off of the board. So we have Cole Kmet, Jeff Wilson, Kendre Miller. Jeff Wilson, who is also in that cycle of running backs in Miami that Donnie's just touched on a little bit. The one that I was looking at was Kendre Miller. I do like him a lot. I think with the Kamara suspension, he's going to have a role early on in the season. When Kamara comes back, he'll definitely take a hit, him and Jamal Williams. But I think that they like him a lot. Obviously, they went after him, they drafted him. So if he gets some of the passing downs, that could be valuable for PPR. Now we have some of the tight ends coming off of the board, which is interesting to see, to know in different drafts that I can wait and get a Njoku or an Ingram at the 12:05, 12:06. So here I am coming back up at the 12:07. I am looking to just add a little bit of depth. I'm kind of disappointed with my penny pick now because I'm looking at Gainwell. And Donnie and I talked about this, I think, on part one. I have a lot of Gainwell. I love him this year. I think he has a pretty big role for Philadelphia. And if anything happens to Penny or Swift, he's a guy that they trust.
Yep, I like Gainwell.
All right. So as I'm coming back, I see Jamison Williams. I'm pretty high on JMO. I know there's a lot of debate about him right now. There were camp reports he was having a bad day. He was frustrated. The rookie cornerback it was on a bad thrown ball. The cornerback broke it up, started talking a little bit of shit to him. He got mad, threw a punch at him. So that came out, but I right before you and I just started the draft, actually, I was on Twitter going through, and I had just seen something come out that said Jamison Williams must have heard the news because he caught, I think, like 7 of 7 targets. One of them was like a 50-yard touchdown bomb. I think this kid, when he gets in the game this year, and he's at this point 2 years removed from the injury, and even last year had great flashes, that he's going to have a role on this offense. And Jared Goff is even more comfortable than what he's been. So I have the capital and wide receivers to wait for him. It gives me a nice division stack with Christian Watson. Those are two defenses that could be two shootouts a year. I think with the North, a lot of those games could be shootouts. So I'm going to take Jameson. I'm going to take the 6 game suspension. And then I'm going to see what comes back to me for running back here when I come up at 1304.
Yeah, and just to add to the Jamison Williams, another little tip: if your league allows suspended players to be put on IR, you are able to put him on IR and pick up somebody off waivers immediately, um, if that is possible in your league. Which sometimes it is, sometimes it is not. It's, commissioner dependent.
How do you
Keep
feel
that in
about
mind.
that?
Um, I think that it is fine if the player's suspended. I don't think there's any harm in it, I guess. I'm trying to think of a downside to it besides, like, it's essentially rostering an additional player, but it's the same thing as an IR, as IR in my mind. Like, if there's a player. I guess you could say if like one of your actual players gets hurt and goes on IR, it would make a difference. But I don't know. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I mean it. At that point, you would have to choose. You know, who are you going to keep in your IR slot, the injured player or the
Yep.
suspended player? I don't. I mean, I don't mind it. I think it can. It goes either way for me. If somebody told me I could do it, I would probably utilize it. Actually, I would
Yep.
1000% utilize it, especially in this position.
Absolutely.
But if you can't, I mean, hey, you can't. Like I said, I have the capital. I have very strong receivers that I can wait the 6 games for him to come back.
So you heard it here. If you don't draft a defense and you draft Jamison Williams, put him on IR, have two extra players.
Absolutely agreed. Tips 102 from Danny and Dennis Brinn. All right, so I'm coming back up. I'm at the 1304. I'm definitely wanting to utilize another running back. We talked about this in the first 12-man PPR draft that we did with handcuffing running backs. For me personally, it's not something that I like to do. So I'm coming down. I am looking at Tank Bigsby. He is somebody who I'm decently high on. No need to really divulge too much. Again, I think he carves a role from the very beginning. I know he's been getting a lot of the passing downs. Jacksonville's offense projected to be one of the better ones this year. So I'm going to take him, add to it. Anything happens to ETN, Tank Bigsby will be in prime spot to shine. And holy running back hill after that. We have Tyler Algier, Deontay Foreman, Raheem Mostert, Kenneth Gainwell, and then Chuba Hubbard. I hope you weren't thinking running back here, Donnie.
I was. I was. But that's okay. I mean, I have my guy that just never gets drafted, and we you touched on it in an indifferent way earlier about Derrick Henry. My guy here that I am going to take is going to be Tajay Spears because I actually could, being since I'm not drafting a defense, I could take Tajay Spears in the 15th round here because no one's going to draft him. And this is a guy that if Derrick Henry gets hurt or gets traded, there was reports coming out in the offseason, then he will have a primary role in that offense. In a Mike Vrabel offense, who runs the ball a million times a game with Derrick Henry. So I do like the upside of Spears. Um, and the guys I can make a case for here, I like Jerome Ford. I am kind of on the, I don't want to say I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum for the handcuff. I like handcuffing running backs only if their handcuff is elite, or he would be elite if he gets that role. So for example, like Madison always was when Cook went out. Madison put up, I felt like 20 points a game every time Cook was out. That type of situation. I don't really know about Elijah Mitchell. I do agree with, like, if you're forced to take Elijah Mitchell in the 10th round to get him, then no, I'm not taking him. But if I can get him, if he would have fell to you at 13 there in the 13th round, I would be okay with handcuffing CMC there, because I do know that the 49ers run the ball a lot. But I think that is it. I don't know about Jerome Ford. I don't know enough about Jerome Ford to say that he is, elite, or he would be elite pending a Nick Chubb injury. I don't even know who Saquon Barkley's backup is anymore. Is it still Breida?
Matt Breida, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't see him doing much of anything if Saquon goes out. I know he was talented in the past, but I don't know. I'm just not huge on Breida. So I think that might be it for my handcuffs. I think it would be a potential CMC if Elijah falls far enough, and yeah, that might be it.
I was just going to say with the running backs, I mean, the tough part is 90% of the league now are two back teams. So,
Yep.
nobody is almost a true handcuff. But if Mitchell did come back on the turn, that's somewhere that I am comfortable to say, okay, I'll add this depth if something does happen to CMC. Because if Mitchell steps in, he's proven he'll continue the same trend of 15, 22, 25 a game. I know they have a lot of talent. The ball's got to get around, but every running back under Shanahan has, they've always produced. Even if it went to Jordan
Yep.
Mason, I mean, he's the first guy coming off the waiver wire if that happens. So,
Yep.
all right.
I agree.
So coming back to it, Donnie, what are you thinking here? Are you still thinking running back, or with the running back hill that just happened, are you thinking of pivoting?
Yeah, I think I'm fairly certain I'm just gonna take Tajay Spears here and be happy with that. I don't think I'm going to be handcuffing Khalil Herbert, like we just said. So Roshan would be an option if I didn't have Khalil Herbert. Not big on Zeke or Leonard Fournette, even if they land somewhere. CEH is probably going to be not probably. Hopefully he doesn't. He could be cut. Gus the Bus, he's going to get 10 carries a game and plod for 4 yards a carry. So there's really no one I'm huge on here. I like Tajay Spears as my home run out of this group. My home run injury away back. So I'm going to take Tajay and then a quarterback in the 14th and see who is left on the board in the 15th round.
All right.
I'm just going to put my head down and click here. No, I'm just kidding. So for my quarterback, I don't see anyone that's standing out besides, like I said, I have all four of these guys: Deshaun, Tua, Daniel Jones, Kirk, and Geno Smith. Now, who do I think out of this group has the most potential upside? The highest pass rate out of these four quarterbacks, I believe, will be Miami. Slightly behind that, I will have Kirk Cousins. So I'm going to go with Tua Tagovailoa as my starting quarterback, who, as we know, last year when he played, he did have some pretty big games.
Oh, Tua was in the MVP talks before he had 20 concussions.
Yeah, I really hope that guy put on. I hope he puts on some size, man.
Oh, he
I
did.
hope he.
He bulked up a little bit. He put on a little bit of size. My man went and got
Yeah,
a.
but I don't know. I feel like you got to see him in a game before you like. They can say that, or you can see him in training camp or whatever. But like when you see him in a game, like I want to see what he looks like in pads, on the field, under the lights, before I can make that determination.
I mean, listen, he went out, got his arm tatted up. He got a little arm sleeve now. Tua's a brand new man.
Yeah,
Okay, so Donnie does take Tua, which is interesting because the team in front of him had Tyreek Hill, but they also have Justin Fields. And then I was looking at team three, they have Waddle. So maybe they were hoping Tua went to. No, because they have Mahomes too.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm the last person to draft a quarterback. That's the only reason why I waited this late.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's a perfect example. For me, I mean, I personally, I wanted the Hurts AJ stack for Donnie. I mean, that makes perfect sense. He waits to the second to last round. He gets Tua, who, again, before injury last year, was a top 10 fantasy quarterback. So, nothing wrong there. The other thing that you have to keep in mind, too, is you're going through your draft, especially in these later rounds, if you have people that, like, you want to target, they're your people that you think are sleepers or somebody who could hit or have good spike weeks, um, you have the leverage to do that because in 10 mans your waiver wire isn't as thick. You're not having to comb through or just
Yep.
nitpick, the low hanging fruit that is left there. In 10 man, it gives you a little bit more freedom to do that. So you got to remember that too as you're drafting. And Donnie made great points on Tajay Spears, and I'm going to follow that with my sleeper pick, who I think if CEH does get cut, it's going to be a big sign to what this kid is doing in camp. Um, and his name is Deneric Prince for the Kansas City Chiefs. I know he's returning kicks today. He was running with the first team. He was with Mahomes. He was catching passes. They said he looked really sharp. The kid is 6 foot. He's 220. Runs a 4.4. I mean, he has base, back, size, and speed. If he shows well, I know I have. Oh, I know I have Pacheco. I know we discussed the cuffs. This is just somebody that, for me, again, and I just touched on this, the waiver wire, it gives me some flexibility. I'm going to stick with my pick and stick with, I think if Deneric Prince, if CEH gets cut, if Deneric Prince makes the team, he could have a role. And if he doesn't, then week one, he's my guy that I drop for my defense.
Yep, I love it.
All right. Mr. Kincaid, and then Zeke, Roshan Johnson, and then we have our defenses: Arizona, Buffalo, Dallas. I'm going to go with the old Dennis Brinn 103 and draft no defenses. And I'm going to come back to. And I'll take Skydmore, top my team off, take another Chief.
I like Sky more.
I do too. I mean, he didn't do much last year. I mean, he didn't really carve a lot of playing time. I mean, I like MVS more than him, truthfully, but if he gets that slot role or if he gets, I like John Mechie too, but that's my point. John Mechie is, he's going to go undrafted. He'll be there. So,
Yep.
but, Sky Moore, if he gets that slot role, that Hardman role, I, he has a shot to be decent. So, and I like, high powered offenses. I think in season long, it's hard to go wrong with that.
All right, Mr. Irrelevant. Who? Oh, Jalen Hyatt. Come on,
That's
I can't
actually,
believe that.
I know. I was actually when I seen that, I was like, damn, that was a sneaky pick.
Yeah, that's usually one of my late last round defense substitution picks. Um, so one thing I want to say before I make the last pick of the draft, this is something that drafting Tua in the 14th round, right? So after Dak went at 805, no other quarterback is drafted. Okay. So sometimes when people get in this spot where I draft Mike Evans at the 801, you're like, oh shit, you know, I don't want, I don't want someone to draft Tua or Daniel Jones or Deshaun Watson or Kirk Cousins and you be out of a quarterback. In theory that's great, but if your league is notorious for drafting backup quarterbacks, which, if you're drafting a backup quarterback anymore, um, there's just no point. You're holding a roster spot when the waiver wire is doing that for you. If your quarterback gets hurt and he's out for the season, you're going to drop him. You can just pick up that quarterback that you have that's on the waiver wire anyway. So the point the point that I'm making is after when Mike Evans is up on the board here, instead of me drafting Tua there and being like, okay, I got my quarterback, I'm good to go, I get Mike Evans. Right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. So I get Mike Evans and then I get Gabe Davis as well. So please don't be the guy who drafts Tua here at 801 or 910 when I have two startable receivers taking over a pick that I got at 5 rounds later. Um, it's just something to keep in mind.
Well, that and I mean, if you take Tua there, you lose one of those tiers in your wide receivers. You lose a starter. You come back, you still, and then you have to make different decisions on Herbert and Nico on how to fill your team at, and then really now you're taking a two shots at a dartboard instead of one. Whereas, as you said, I mean, Tua dropped way down, and it just allowed you to stack your meat and potatoes of the offense, and then cap it off with possibly, truthfully, upside of a top 5, top 10 quarterback.
Yep. And in this situation at the Mr. Irrelevant, I am not too sure. I would have loved to take Jalen Hyatt. I am okay with stacking Jalen Hyatt on top of Darren Waller. I think that Jalen Hyatt probably has the most upside in that offense. Out of the receivers, and I would have loved to have gotten him there. The guys that are left on the board, again, not personally not huge on Fields. If I have him projected at 1400, that'd be awful. If I have him projected at 2,800 yards passing, I don't think Mooney's going to get much. If DJ Moore's a thousand yard receiver, the guy they just paid 50 million, Cole Kmet, is going to have to get some of that. So I don't think that leaves much left over for Darnell Mooney. Great player, just don't foresee him doing a lot. There is an interesting person on the board, which I we're talking about handcuffs, and this is not necessarily a traditional thing to do. However, I know that Tyler Boyd is a fantastic player. Okay. And I know that if T. Higgins or Jamar Chase comes off the field, then Tyler Boyd is in one of the highest pass rates in the league, and one of the potential MVP candidates throwing him the ball. Um, I don't foresee many people that I am going to keep on my roster going into week one. Um, let's see. I could make that argument for Tyler Boyd, but um, I don't think I'm going to do that. Let's see.
Well, I mean, Boyd definitely has a role as the number three, and he's had his games too, even with both of them healthy. But I mean, you're right. It's kind of that's a tougher cuff with the wide receivers, and it's always harder to start. I would say a slot receiver and your second option instead of like I would almost I'm more comfortable with like a Chase Boyd because Chase usually he's going to average what he does, and then you hope that Boyd hits as well. But I would
Yeah,
agree. I would agree with you. That's a tougher cuff. I mean, if you took it, it's not. I don't think it's something that you mind because again, for you, when we get to week one, we have somebody who's coming off our team anyway.
yeah. This is it's a interesting thing because it's an interesting position to be in at this point because you know um I could make the argument for Tyler Boyd. And I'm thinking of injuries before preseason starts because remember, this is the player that I'm drafting. That's the only reason why I'm not going to take Boyd is because this is the player that I'm drafting that I'm probably going to drop unless something happens to change his position. Um, so that's why I'm not going to take Boyd. So, with that being said, I think the clearest one in that position is going to be Zamir White. So if Josh Jacobs doesn't show up to week one, I now have the starting running back of the Raiders. So I'm probably going to draft Zamir White at the Mr. Irrelevant, and you know I don't want to say pray Jacobs doesn't show up, but that would be the hope.
Okay. So it drops my team. I definitely agree with that. That's not a bit Mr. Irrelevant at all. If Jacobs doesn't show up, Samir White is primed to have a even if it's a shared backfield, I mean he's primed to get a decent role and volume with running backs always shows to be efficient, especially in PPR. If Samir White gets any sort of receptions, I know they added depth with Jacoby Myers. I know Hunter Renfro's coming back for the slot, and then you have big dog Devontae on the outside, but not a bad last pick when it comes to Zamir White.
What
Um,
was your grade?
so they gave me my favorite number, an 88 out of 100, a B plus consensus of 97 experts. Which
Oof.
I mean that probably makes sense because I have Deneric Prince, who's probably going undrafted in most home leagues, especially 10 man, and Sky Moore, but that makes sense where I took him in the last round. The Deneric Prince thing, I could see that drop in my grade.
Yeah, and I think that the grade you not having a defense is also going to like it's going to kind of throw off the grade, if you will, because it's not counting defensive points for you at all.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think that definitely plays a factor. But yeah, I got you did better than me. I got a 76 out of 100 and a C.
Okay. So, and that honestly though, Donnie, that brings me to my point that we were talking about this in between episodes that this year I really think there is a drastic difference of getting the top 4 and depending on your league, top 5 picks versus 6 through 10 or 6 through 12. Getting one of these elite guys, the JJ, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Cooper Cup, knock on wood, he comes back. Tyreek Hill, CMC, even I mean at that point I feel like there's your drop off. Even when you get to the Eckler, Diggs, AJ Brown, like at that point those ADPs and Kelsey, they're never guaranteed to go in order in a sense. Whereas like your top 4, top 5 typically are falling in that order, and that's the drastic difference of teams, and
Yep.
that's what we're starting to see.
And
So
that's why it plays such a major factor to like, all right, so the positions that you're lacking in, so you need to be drafting, like so for example, like my team, I drafted 2 stud running backs in the beginning, and that's why it was so important for me to draft as many receivers as I did, because I am going not necessarily need, I am going to it would benefit me tremendously if I hit on one of those receivers that I drafted, like a Mike Evans or a Gabe Davis or Nico Collins. Like if Nico goes off and he becomes startable, or if Gabe Davis has the year we all know he can, and he becomes startable, then it drastically changes my team. That's why I like whatever I do in these late picks, whatever I do in the early rounds, I do the opposite of. I try to do the opposite of in the middle rounds.
did you want to go through, just break down what your team was, and then I'll go through mine?
Yep. So at the 110, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, and when it came back to me, the best 2 receivers on the board were Chris Olave and T Higgins. And then in the full PPR, half PPR may be different. I don't want to say running backs mean more to me, but they kind of do a little bit. Um, but full PPR, double flex, I'm starting 4 wide receivers if it's, every single time it's humanly possible. So I went double receiver again. Jerry Judy, McLaurin. I got Waller, which I feel could potentially will will be a top 5 tight end. Um, and then still continued with receiver depth and Mike Evans and Gabe Davis, who could potentially be starters. Still got a starting running back in round 10, Khalil Herbert. Nico Collins is path to wide receiver 1 on the Texans. Damian Harris, Tajay Spears, my quarterback in the 14th round, and Mr. Irrelevant Zamir White.
Yeah, and I still think, I mean, those are strong, strong wide receivers. Barkley and Chubb in PPR. I mean, Barkley, his contract, the incentives. I think he wants to go out and show, that he's just a different breed at running back. So I see nothing wrong with that. I mean, I personally, I'm not giving it a 76, but, Fantasy Pro,
I guess they're the pros.
they're 97 guys that went through that for us in about 0.75 seconds. But again, I get that, man. I think it's too. It's just the spot, picking 10th versus picking fourth it's just a difference this year for me. So for me, I came out. The board actually went in order of my rankings. It went JJ, Jamar, Cooper Cup. So I took CMC. Came back, I got AJ Brown. I took Jalen Hurts for the correlation, Calvin Ridley, Debo Samuel to stack my receivers. Dallas Goddard to add to my Philly stack, Christian Watson, hopefully the number one there in Green Bay. Come back with a Cam Akers who dropped to me at 77, Isaiah Pacheco, Zay Flowers, Rashad Penny, my man Jamison Williams, Tank Bigsby, a roll of the dice for Mr. Deneric Prince, and then another roll of the dice for Sky Moore. We'll decide between those two who we're going to drop for our defense. And that team, they gave me a score of 88, which is a B plus.
Yeah, and again, you know, when you get a grade in these things, if your rankings, I urge people to, even if you don't do the top, if even if you do the top 100 or the top 150 in 10 mans, you're only going to get to 150. So you don't have to go through and make 400 player rankings, but just do basic rankings on who you like more. And that's because, and the reason I say that is because when you get to these drafts and you see players on the board, you're counting on other on experts, quote unquote, ADP, and if you personally like a player, like for example, if you personally like Jerry Judy more than D Hop, but D Hop is ranked higher, and you subconsciously feel that you're making a move by drafting Jerry Judy, then you're gonna feel worse about your team out of the gate. And it's just in my mind, since I've been using my own rankings, I tend to draft teams that I like better, and I've gotten some good results. So yeah, that's just my recommendation, my end of the video recommendation.
Yeah, and just to I just want to touch on this and then I'll go ahead and close it out as well. So like last year I had done all these mock drafts for on Yahoo when I got my picks for my teams, and everything that came back honestly, because it was a lot of hero RB, zero RB, was like 72, 76, C minus, D plus, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, you know, whatever. It's a Yahoo fantasy draft from what they think. So to just lead in a little bit more to Donnie's point, if you have somebody that's ranked higher that you're targeting, don't go based off of the 88 out of 100 or the 76 out of 100. You have to go off of the results that you've done in previous years. And for me, with that, even with all those shitty grades that Yahoo gave me out of the 100 drafts that I did, I had good advance rates for my season long teams.
Yep, and that's just the reality of it. The experts aren't always right. I mean, put it this way: if you put 10 experts in a league, guess how many are winning? One.
That's
So
it.
9 of them were wrong.
All right. So listen, thank you guys very, very, very much. Anybody who spends time with us, takes a minute to listen, enjoys any of the content, we greatly appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind, if you could hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, that is free. It helps us out tremendously. We look forward to bringing you a 12-man half PPR next week, as we're going to get into a little bit of public leagues. People who, outside of just their friend groups, want to get into some additional drafts. I know Donnie did a bunch last year. I did a few. I did one as well, just to add to my stack of leagues, kind of see what it was like. Had a lot of fun with it. So we're looking forward to bringing that to you. We're going to talk a little bit through that next week. And with that, I'm Danny. He's Donnie. We'll see you next week, and we appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Have a good night, everybody.